This episode of Radio Spaetkauf is sponsored by Athletic Greens. Their product AG1 is a powdered mixture of 75 vitamins, minerals, botanicals, bacterial cultures, and nutrients from real whole foods. High-quality ingredients with high bioavailability to ensure all that good stuff is absorbed fully by your body. One daily spoonful supports mental fitness, the immune system, muscle recovery, energy balance, and hormone function.
Now, I've been taking AG1 for about a month, and I love it. I take 1 scoop every morning with a bit of water, shake it up into a green liquid and drink it. I usually start my days with a bit of sports, and this little kick I get from AG1, little energy, really is perfect for that. Occasionally I will take out my dog on walks and then I'll bring my AG1 with me. It makes me feel very LA while picking up my dog's shit.
I'm not a huge fan of early morning breakfast, so not only does the mix of 1 scoop of powder with water make me feel like a functioning, healthy adult who's putting good things into my body in the morning, but it doesn't really taste like a green drink. At least not like most of the ones I've tried. The clean, pleasantly sweet taste helps launch me into the day with all the good stuff I'll need before my stomach wakes up and is ready for a big meal. AG1 offers a monthly membership completely flexible and risk-free. AG1 will be delivered to your door every month without obligation and without contract period, so you can pause or unsubscribe at any time. And there's a 60-day money-back guarantee, so you can do a completely risk-free 2-month trial and get your money back, no questions asked. The copper, folate, selenium, zinc, and vitamins A, B12, B6, and C in AG1 support the immune system, so autumn and winter are a really good time to start your AG1 routine. Radio Spaetkauf listeners get a special deal. Sign up at athleticgreens.com/Spaetkauf and receive some free bonuses. A year's supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 drops, which supports immune system, bones, teeth, muscles, and general well-being, 5 travel rations packed in little sachets, and an AG1 starter kit, a storage tin for the fridge, a scooper, and a handy shaker bottle. athleticgreens.com/Spaetkauf.
Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.
It's Saturday, November 19th, 2022. This is Radio Spaetkauf, Berlin's news podcast, recording live at Two Fellas Brewery. I'm Daniel Stern.
I'm Izzy Choksi.
I'm Joran Mandik.
And I'm Matilda Kaiser.
Coming up, it's final. We get to redo those long queues to vote, and this time in February weather. The decision has been made. The Berlin election will have to be redone, and we've got Konrad Werner from Deutsche Welle to talk us through what that means and what we need to know. Later on in the show, Leah Beckmann, a lawyer and anti-discrimination expert for the Gesellschaft für Freiheitsrechte, will talk us through how Berlin law enforcement is failing people with disabilities in cases of gendered harassment and violence. So stay tuned for that.
You might have forgotten that half a year ago, we were worried about getting another pandemic on top of the current one. Everybody remember monkeypox? In surprisingly good news, to our July interview with queer activist Pansy, monkeypox numbers in Berlin have dropped from around 200 reported weekly at its peak to only a few cases per week registered since September. The outbreak is not over, but with the stigmatization and shaming of queer community members seeking vaccines in early summer, this is a welcome turnaround and definitely one to celebrate. See, this is what can happen when you don't rely on straight cis people to get the word out about vaccines. And maybe we can also put on some drag shows to promote COVID boosters or COVID vaccines for unvaccinated people.
So if you've got 160 euros to burn in your pocket, you can now buy official Berlin sneakers at KaDeWe and a few other stores around town. They are white, flat-soled, high-top sneakers with Berlin in red on the lettering.
What is this?
It's a shoe.
Are they sponsoring us?
Go on.
Go on, Dizzy.
So the shoe design is a collaboration between French label Vaja and the Berlin Senate. It's part of Berlin's marketing scheme and cost the city 105,000 euros so that you could pay 160 euros to become a brand ambassador from Berlin. You don't want to be a brand ambassador for Berlin?
We're brand ambassadors by living here.
By doing podcasts about politics.
No, we live here. How much more a freaking brand ambassador do I have to be? I came to Pankow and it's like -5.
You want to be a brand ambassador for Panko now?
They should have given us money to make the podcast. That's better use of brand ambassador money.
Yeah, imagine if instead of spending 105,000 euros on designing a sneaker, they would just give that money to us.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
That made a lot of sense.
But how much do sneakers? How many sneakers did they buy for 100? I don't understand the math of this.
That's just how much they spent into making the idea.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you could get the Beifalge ones and you bought them for a certain amount of money and it was also an abo?
Yeah.
So if you wore them whilst you were on the train, it meant that you didn't have to pay for a
this
ticket.
This one is just a shoe.
Yeah.
This is
Very
now.
expensive
I think with this sneaker, you're allowed to live here. These are sneakers with Anmeldung.
They only made 1,087 of them. Don't ask me why that number.
They made 1,087 of them. That's that's great. That's less than 1,000 per.
All right, moving on. Over the last couple of years, raccoons have started proliferating in Berlin, and now the German Hunting Association wants to make hunting the animals legal in Berlin. They are threatening birds and vulnerable amphibians, and apparently homeowners and apartment dwellers have had trouble with raccoons nesting in attics and destroying wall and roof insulation as well. But the Berlin Senate favors softer measures and hopes to decrease numbers by informing people and decreasing raccoon access to trash bins. To do this, they put together an on-site raccoon counseling service in 2021. The pilot project at the moment lays dormant, but it's coming back in 2023 as it looks, so phew, you've got someone to call next year about your raccoon troubles.
You know who doesn't lay dormant? Raccoons.
Exactly. Has anyone here seen a raccoon?
I have a colleague who saw a raccoon on his bike on the way to work.
But they're not. I thought Germans loved them.
Yeah, but not in the city and in your attic.
I was told I have raccoon hands.
Oh yeah.
I realize this is an audio medium. Over the last few months, Berlin has registered a sharp increase in refugee arrivals. The Senate has reacted by promising to create new temporary accommodation for 10,000 people before the end of the year. Up to 1,600 beds will be installed inside Tempelhof Airport hangars 2 and 3. These are the same hangars that until recently housed Walter Smerling's atrocious Kunsthalle Berlin, and thanks to intense pressure from Berlin's artist community, Smerling and his posse have since been ousted. Smerling out, people in need in, and we think that's pretty good.
It's official. Berliners will have to return to the voting booths. Berlin's Constitutional Court ruled on Wednesday that the Senate and Bezirks elections will have to be redone completely. This is a first for the nation on this scale and has been widely covered in the international media. Parties now have 2 months to get their ducks in a row and mount a sort of sprint campaign before the re-election on February 12. Here to tell us about the ramifications of this decision is friend of the show, frequent Radio Spaetkauf guest and co-host of the wonderful podcast Megan's Megacan, Konrad Werner. Please welcome.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you for coming on the show. Tell us.
Thanks for having me.
So this decision happened Wednesday the 16th. It was official. We've all anticipated it.
Yes.
Tell us who's happy, who's now very worried. What's the lay of the land?
Well, it's getting iffy for Giffy.
Oh.
Someone said. I stole that from Twitter. Someone said it on Twitter. Our mayor, Franziska Giffey, she now is in trouble because she might get unelected. It's difficult to say what it means constitutionally because it's not officially, it's a repeat of the last election, but you can't really repeat an election.
But so she could no longer be mayor.
Yeah. So at the moment, there's a neck and neck race in the polls between the CDU, her SPD, and the Greens, and they're all on 20%. And the election is officially for the Berlin Parliament, the Abgeordnetenhaus, and yeah, so there could be a different majority. Officially, she wouldn't necessarily have to step down, but if she doesn't have a majority, she probably will have to step down because she can't really govern without a majority in the parliament.
So the judges use the language of political legitimacy in order to advocate for a redo of this election. Does this mean that Giffey has essentially been illegitimately ruling as mayor for the past year and a bit, seeing as these concerns were raised back then? And does it also make the decisions that have been made by the current Senate illegitimate?
No. It's all, there are laws about that. You can't just avoid the whole everything that the government has done so far. And in fact, the judge said that on Wednesday. Everything that the government did so far is still legitimate. It still counts. But they won't have to. She's not going to have to undo loads of laws, and that'd be a nightmare. Can you imagine?
So I've heard like the CDU, AfD, FDP, all basically the right half of the spectrum, very happy about this, elated almost.
Well, yeah, because they lost, right? So they lost the election, so now they get another chance. So they're obviously very happy. They're even more happy they're more annoyed about the federal election, because are we going to go into that? Because that's a whole different thing. But anyway, in the federal election...
Yeah. but the elections that are being repeated is not the federal election.
Yeah, it's not the federal election, but the federal election might be repeated still.
In Berlin.
In Berlin, yeah. And the CDU and the AfD are suing to repeat the election in more constituencies around Berlin. So not just they've decided it's going to be 431, and the CDU and AfD are like, well, why don't we do all of them like with the state election, because then they get more chance.
What are the possible repercussions of this re-election?
Well, the main thing is we could have a new government in Berlin. That would be a big repercussion. There's a lot of complications with the Bezirke. So it's not just the state election, but the elections for the local district councils. Also, the municipal elections, and that's all your little districts, which EU citizens can also vote in. And they are also having to go in re-election. And there's a lot of complications in those because a lot of these people who didn't get elected now have to stand again.
Wait, are there people who are bummed out that they're up for election again?
Well, spare a thought for Ingrid Bertermann.
Dan's been sparing all his thoughts.
She was elected to the local council in Mitte. But she was a Green candidate at the time. 2 months later, she switched parties to the Linke. But she has to stand again for the Green Party in the next election, which will be in February. Which is sort of not fair on the voters as well, because then they know if they vote for her, they'll really be voting for a Linke politician and not a Green
Can they
politician.
just switch her out after the vote and everyone knows like who the next one's going to be?
Well, I mean, she could resign or she could step down or something. I don't know, but there's a lot of problems like that.
Yeah, I guess the big scramble is on for SPD, maybe the Greens as well. Have you seen any promises made?
By who? The Greens?
Whoever. Greens, SPD, what are they scrambling on?
Well, the SPD, especially Giffey, is very keen to make sure that the election runs smoothly this time. So she's made all these promises, and obviously that's a big problem. So that's like a big promise, and they're 39 million they're spending.
So
on the campaign,
on the election, on the new election.
Oh, yeah.
Taxpayers' money.
Yeah, that was the big... if you read the tabloids like me, that was the big headline. It was not any of Ingrid's running again for a different party. It was 39 million? That's what? But, how much did the first one cost?
I don't know.
Is this one cheaper?
Well, I guess they all cost about that. I know this one will probably be more expensive because they're going to get more volunteers in, and they have to make sure that everything runs smoothly this time, not like last time.
So if everyone's going back on the campaign trail, does that mean we're basically going to go through the cold winter, as it's been dubbed, without a government because everyone's campaigning so hard?
Well, yeah, but no more than any other election campaign season. The government is still in power.
Yeah.
You know that during elections, governments are still there, right?
Yeah, but they stop working and worry about the campaign instead.
That's why they put the 90-day limit on it, so that they wouldn't be like a 6-month campaign. There has to be a 90-day.
So will we be swarmed by posters again?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably. And it depends, though.
Depends on the Bezirk, because not all of them get to vote again.
No, all of them get to vote again in the local election.
Okay.
Well, it depends a lot on whether the parties can afford it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so last year we had a record number of small parties, around, I think, 32 parties in total that ran on the ballot. And with this quick turnaround time, and also with the cost of running an election as well, Do you think many of those smaller parties will not run this time or not be able to afford to run this time? And what effect is that going to have on the election
probably,
result?
Yeah, I mean, these small parties, they don't have a lot of money, and they probably won't be able to run the same size of campaign. And a lot of these people they're not career politicians, the candidates of these parties. They've all got jobs, and they probably don't really feel like, a lot of them probably don't really feel like running again because they've got other stuff to do now. So it is a bit annoying for them. So probably, as I understand it, the law is that they have to be on the ballot, but whether they actually campaign is up to them, I guess.
Right. Is there a law like they ought to make a good show of it?
Imagine if you get voted in and you're not even running a campaign and you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, well, then you can, you don't have to take the office, you can resign. You don't have to do it, but you will be voted in, if they win. Okay. It's unlikely they will win, though.
Beware, all those who put themselves forward last time.
Yeah.
For $39 million, they could have designed
a better shoe.
400 brands of shoes. We could have had a whole. We could have gotten all kinds of merch.
We could have had it all.
We could have Berlin jackets and.
The Berliner Zeitung calculated that for 39 million we could sign up everyone in Berlin to Twitter. We could get everyone a
blue tick.
A blue tick on a blue tick on Twitter.
But for how long?
Like a month.
For a month, yeah.
Some more goodwill towards
amongst
Elon
other things.
after the Brandenburg thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
We saw this tweet as well that said that Franziska Giffey's schedule on Monday looks as follows. 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., all opening of different Christmas markets.
Good.
She's hitting the campaign trail hard, I'd say.
Yep. Taking the people's needs into account.
It is Christmas market. Could we just talk about Christmas markets instead of this election?
Do you guys think
Does it matter?
Do you think that if Giffey loses the election, she's going to do the same thing she did with her doctorate thesis? Like, no.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
Just run with someone else's votes?
Yeah.
Which Christmas markets is she going to? I've been asleep this whole time. I perked right up now.
I didn't write it down.
We can always hear you on your podcast, right?
Yes.
Megan's Megacan.
It's a lot like this, except with an outraged Irish lady.
Oh. And why don't we have one of those?
Getting drunk on 10% alcoholic beverages in a can.
Yeah. So it's basically me just sort of whittering on, and then Megan gets annoyed about
with
the
you?
news.
Oh,
with me about the news. Not generally, but it's sort of like this.
Anything else you want to plug?
No, that's it. That's
okay.
All my whole life.
If people want to vote, where do they know?
Get a German passport first of all.
Yeah.
I just wanted to plug the last episode actually of your podcast, which was excellent. It was about police, incompetence and police generally, not just in Berlin but across Germany.
Racial profiling in the
horrendous.
police. We did an extra special episode on that. That was a pretty good one.
2 amazing guests. So would really promote that.
Okay. Yeah, Megan's Megacan on all your podcast sources.
All right, thanks for joining us.
And Dan, if you want an outraged Italian lady, you can just give me booze.
No, you scare me.
Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin news in English.
So we've got an update on the Klimaneustart 2030 initiative that we had on the show in September. So they did manage to collect around 262,000 signatures, which is way more than the 170,000 that they required to get a referendum going. So this came as a surprise, as last weekend the initiative's leadership publicly worried that they weren't going to get enough signatures before the 14th of November deadline. By last Sunday, they had gathered 180,000, but with 25% of signatures assumed to be invalid, supporters heard the call and over 1,000 people took to the streets for a last-minute push to get them over the line. So nice one, guys, and we will be having that referendum.
Yeah. There's a question of whether this will be held on the same day as the election, though, as Senat doesn't want to overburden election officials like last time. But the problem there is that the Volksentscheid needs at least 25% of registered registered voters to participate in order to be valid. And that's clearly a lot easier to achieve if people are already heading to the polls. Many in the campaign viewed doing it on a different day as grossly negligent and possibly undemocratic, as they feel they are being set up to fail. The drama never ends with this election, it seems, and it's also worth pointing out that the 2030 climate neutral target, if successful, will automatically pass into law and will have to be acted upon.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, I think that's different, right, from Deutsche Wohnen Co-enteignen.
Yes, they didn't have a law
They didn't have a law
to run with. So this one, they're bringing an amendment to an existing law. The law about getting out of fossil fuels, basically. There's a law for that. But that says, what year? 2045. So they're proposing an amendment to that law to get us out by 2030. And so if the referendum passes, this law is a law. The law passes, and then we'll have to act upon it.
Yeah, except if we don't.
8 years. Except if you don't.
I mean, not gonna there's like certain laws, like if you break them, you go to jail or whatever. But this one, if they don't do it, they'll what?
Millions will die across the world from climate change.
Well, yeah, that's happening regardless.
If they don't do it,
Germany isn't, or Berlin isn't really an important. Okay,
What's your point, Dan?
My point is,
Where
how does the government enforce a law on itself?
Good question.
We do have
we do have like the expert council for the climate expert council, which does they do it on a federal level, but they go around all the ministries and they basically see whether they're actually achieving their climate targets, and if they're not achieving their climate targets, then they sort of wag their finger at them and say, you need to do better, and you're going against the law. And so this year we had the Ministry of Transport that were taken in front of the expert group and told that they needed to do a lot better than they were doing, and they're now renegotiating their climate targets because of that. So I mean, I guess maybe Berlin has a similar expert council that's holding.
But we're
going to
rely on finger wagging,
but also lawsuits as well. Right. So the citizens will be able to say, actually, the Berlin Senate is actually committing a crime because they are not actually achieving what they're supposed to be achieving. So it sets it up for lots of different ways that citizens can get involved with holding them to account.
Right.
Lawyers can get involved with holding to account. So yeah, law is a powerful thing.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay.
I did volunteer to help gather signatures. I'm not like completely cynical about this. So I didn't do it, but I did volunteer and I got the papers and stuff.
Meanwhile, the climate activists with the Last Generation, or Letzte Generation, who we spoke to on our July show, are keeping active. On Friday morning, they blocked access to the BER airport and were joined by fellow climate activist groups Extinction Rebellion and Ende, Gelände. And this was part of a global group of actions taken to raise awareness about ongoing negotiations at COP27 in Egypt that might see the world abandon the 1.5 Celsius as a climate target.
That would be a death sentence for millions, potentially, if they abandoned that target.
Yeah, it would be quite horrible.
Yeah, so activists drove their cars to a slow stop to block the exits from the Autobahn and then proceeded to glue themselves to the street. And if you're thinking it sounds like there's a new climate action almost every day, then you would be right. Last week, activists took over Invalidenstraße, Landsberger Allee and the Gneisenstraße Mehringdamm crossing. So I hope no one's planning on driving to the airport for upcoming holidays.
It's December, and with Berlin's first snowfall on the books, natural sunlight is fast becoming but a distant memory. Especially for residents in Neukölln who woke up one morning last month to their entire building being covered by a massive advert. During the day, it's impossible to tell if the sun is even shining, and a resident of the Sonnenallee apartment block lamented on social media. At night, it's lit up by a massive floodlights, and the advert has now been ruled illegal by the Bezirksamt Neukölln. And while many of our listeners might have heard about the story, this isn't the only building in Berlin that's been sentenced to darkness. An apartment building on Kantstraße has been in the same situation for an entire year now. And in both cases, the adverts covered the building and minimal, if any, construction efforts had actually started. This is technically legal, which is why the Kantstraße ad has been allowed for so long. But let's hope that the Sonnenallee ruling puts an end to this landlord money-making scheme. I was of the understanding that if that's the case, they have to lower your rent because they're making money on the adverts. However, I also know that has not always been the case, and actually, Deviant Eichmann, I think, was trying to help a group of people who had this issue on Hermannstraße and were covered also for, I think, a year.
This is horrifying.
It is horrifying, considering how sad I feel at 5 p.m. and I see the light in quotations during the day. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in that situation, get in touch with your Mieterverein. See what they can do. If they can get
At the very least, get your rent decreased.
Get your rent decreased.
But it does mean that you are then a brand ambassador, which is the most exciting thing you can be.
But if you don't have the shoes,
right?
No shoes.
Well,
no
yeah.
brand ambassador.
I feel like wrapping your building in an advertisement is, that's almost as good as wearing the sneakers.
It's putting in the legwork.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, was that a sneaker pun?
I think I
All right.
didn't do it on purpose.
It was pun
but I
adjacent.
feel like it went there.
No.
In April 2021, we reported on a petition by the BVG, weil wir uns fürchten campaign to get the BVG to reel in the massive overreach and violent practices by ticket controllers, leading to cases of often racialized violence. Shout out to our colleague Anne-Marie Harrison for bringing us the story back then. And earlier this month, ZDF's investigative magazine, ZDF being one of the huge German public TV stations.
Zweites deutsches Fernsehen.
Correct, yes. So their investigative magazine called Frontal released a new short documentary detailing the issue. And so a mainstream German news outlet reporting on these cases and showing that this is a systemic thing and not just a case-by-case thing is a long overdue success for the campaigners. The BVG, though, continues to defer responsibility to the sub-companies providing the controllers. So they're like, we're not hiring these controllers, it's not our fault. They're basically just deferring all of this heat. And interestingly, one of the reasons controllers often get away with violence is that riding without a ticket is still a criminal offense, which is a problem we've reported on before, because it's the reason many people are in jail in Berlin, literally for just riding without a ticket.
Maybe we could send these people to hunt the raccoons.
Instead, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if that's their personality profile, like, if you got some aggression you need to get out, I don't know. I still like the raccoons so much.
The Raccoon Counseling Center will be hiring from January 2023.
Speaking of public transport, last month Berlin launched the 29 euro ticket to replace the highly popular 9 euro ticket from the summer. And the rollout was as messy as the U8 on a Saturday night. At the beginning of November, the BVG tweeted that trying to get the ticket for November was futile as they had run out of physical tickets. Many people did not receive their physical ticket in time and got a fine if they showed their email confirmation. And trying to contest this gave you a technical error. So let's say that if you want the 29 euro ticket, you have to think about it well in advance. The date that the BVG gives you is the 20th of the prior month. And even then, it is not said that you would get your physical ticket in time.
How?
So on the federal, just to add complication to this, Germany has cleared financing to create a 49 euro ticket that would cover the same stuff as the 29 euro ticket, as well as all regional travel throughout the land of Germany as well. So it is a direct replacement to the 9 euro ticket, but it's going to cost us 49 euros a month. So technically this should be rolled out in January. But Franziska Giffey wanted to actually put forward the 29 euro ticket as a way to garner favor with Berliners ahead of the rerun of the election, because she was quite clear that this was going to happen in around about the end of summer. And so the 29 euro ticket was the one that got put forward. Berliners don't seem to be very impressed by this, though. As we saw in the polling, they are clearly keeping the receipts and hoping for an exchange in February. But the BVG seems to have started the bureaucracy machine of the 49 euro ticket, though. I got my letter in the post this morning telling me how to swap my abo over from the 29 euro to the 49 euro ticket. So as everyone knows, in Germany, if you get the letter in the post, shit is going to start happening.
But for now, until March, we've got the 29 euro ticket in place.
Ish.
Yeah. Of course.
Right, but if you only get it through a subscription, you can't just get it as a monthly basis, which means to get out of it in time, I probably have to cancel it like last month.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you to everyone who listens. We appreciate the audience and the community. If you would like to help keep this project viable, Dan, you want to do this one?
Hey, thanks to everybody who listens. We appreciate the audience and the community. But if you would like to help keep this project financially viable, we'd appreciate your support. Become a monthly supporter or make a one-time donation at radiospaetkauf.com. You can also support us by coming out to a live show, buying a ticket, or making a cash donation straight to me. Along with that, today, we'll be starting to print our own merch right here after the show. You can bring in your own blank T-shirt, and I'll put an ink pad to your chest, and you can walk away branded for life on that T-shirt with Radio Spaetkauf.
This took a turn. Let's have a stinger.
Radio Spaetkauf.
Our next topic is about discrimination against people with disabilities by law enforcement. So we do want to include a content warning here, as we will be discussing some cases that involve sexual harassment and violence. In 2020, a woman with a learning disability known by the pseudonym of Sonja M. was sexually harassed and assaulted at work by her supervisor, who does not have a disability. When she came forward with her complaint, the police were extremely slow to respond and then conducted the investigation in such an inappropriate manner that her lawyer filed a complaint with the Constitutional Court of Berlin, alleging that she was not afforded proper legal protections and was discriminated against. The case has opened up a larger question about how police deals with sexualized violence against women with disabilities in general. Lea Beckmann is one of the lawyers on the case and also an anti-discrimination expert for the Gesellschaft für Freiheitsrechte, a non-profit that uses litigation and legal intervention to promote democracy and enforce equal rights and social participation. Lea, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Sonja M's case so that we all understand?
Thank you very much for having me. I think you summed it up quite well, and I think the gravest issue with the prosecution actually was a psychological evaluation that was asked for, and that came to the conclusion that Sonja M. was incapable to testify, I think is how I would translate. And this was, flawed in many ways, and the way it was conducted was very discriminatory.
Because it took away her right to...
It pretty much means that whatever she said has no value, and this on grounds that the psychological evaluation was done in a very flawed manner. We have an independent expert who worked on this psychological opinion and said it was just wrongly conducted, and she didn't have any proper chance to testify against her perpetrator.
How was it wrongly conducted? What does that mean?
So, already the outcome is wrong. The outcome is that she's incapable to testify, and that is a limit that is very low burden, which pretty much means, is the person in abstract able to recall what happened and re-narrate it? So even a 4 to 6 year old child would be able to testify, and only in cases of grave learning disabilities will someone be unable possibly to testify. So the outcome is incorrect, but also the way it was conducted was very discriminatory and actually traumatic for Sonja. Just as an example, the psychologist started with using informal you from the beginning on, using tests that are aimed at children, very small children. This is an adult woman. And, for example, evaluated her the first time they met for over 3 hours without a break, which for everyone I think is quite brutal, but particularly someone with a learning disability was traumatic. Sonja M. understandably broke down and cried in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say that the way the police handled this case is representative of the way that the police handles cases with people with disabilities?
Yeah, so we work as a team of 3 lawyers on this case, and Ronska Grimm, who is a lawyer, a Berlin lawyer, worked with Sonja M. from the very beginning, and Ronska Grimm, as a criminal lawyer, very often works with women with disabilities who are affected by sexual violence. And Ronska Grimm says this is very typical. Mm-hmm. No cases are ever properly investigated. No cases are ever brought to court. And actually, if you look up in legal databases, I don't know of any case that was ever brought to even trial on the basis of testimony of someone with learning disability. So this is really a big structural problem. There is UN bodies on this, human rights organization. It's not a secret. There's a lot of evidence behind this, but police and prosecution do not change their approach so far.
I mean, so it's kind of like when you fail to prosecute a crime, you're essentially almost decriminalizing it without decriminalizing it officially. Would you say that crimes against or sexual violence crimes against women, especially with disabilities, is essentially decriminalized in Germany because prosecutions are basically impossible to get?
Yeah, de facto you could say that. And women with disabilities are affected 2 to 3 times more by sexual violence. So this is a huge issue. And in particular, in exactly the same way this happened, for example, in these exclusive institutions, they're just very vulnerable to it. They are very much affected by it, but cases are never won.
What are the next steps now in Sonja M's case, and what are you as a team of lawyers hoping to achieve for her?
Yeah, so I want to be clear. I think we have some sort of prospect of winning this on the national level. If we don't, I think we have very good prospects of winning this on the international level, either at the European Court of Human Rights or at the UN Committee for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But this means in the individual case, I think it's very unlikely that the perpetrator here will be prosecuted at any point. So there will not be individual justice. There will possibly be an outcome of where at least we have a court decide that it was unlawful to end the investigation as it was. But it's strategic litigation, so we're doing this beyond the individual case to try and push Berlin prosecution and Berlin police to finally adapt to sexual violence against women with disabilities.
Oh, wow.
How could anyone possibly justify excluding someone for any reason from testifying? I can't imagine what would be a valid reason to exclude someone from testifying in their own case.
So I can imagine if someone has a very, very severe learning disability to where they cannot recall or re-narrate, then it's very hard to put that testimony on the stand, right?
But wouldn't that be incumbent upon the prosecutor to decide whether or not,
this was the prosecution that closed investigations, right?
Right.
On the basis of a psychological evaluation, which they do, which is standard in cases of sexual violence against all sorts of women. If there's like one person's word against another person's word, there will be very often a psychological evaluation to look at the testimony to say, is it credible? Is it plausible?
Right.
But just in cases of women with learning disabilities, women will be excluded on these grounds very often.
Are the perpetrators also subjected to a psychological evaluation as well?
Well, they might be in individual cases, but the burden of proof for a criminal case is always against the perpetrator to prove the crime.
So I'm sorry if I misunderstand. So are the prosecutors attempting to use this evaluation in order to just strengthen the testimony, and that's the reason why they would choose this, or why have this?
Why have a psychological evaluation? Because particularly in cases with someone with a learning disability, it might be hard to judge without some expert knowledge whether or not what the person says is, plausible and credible. So even in cases where the victim has no disabilities, very often this is done to help, let's say, the judge or the prosecution to evaluate whether or not it was a coherent, plausible. Was there grounds for motive for the person to lie? Is there any evidence suggesting that they were influenced by people around them to testify the way they did?
Why is it that they were incapable of representing their own client in a way that made sense?
So are you kind of asking me what should they do better? What are we aiming? What should this look like, this kind of investigation, to properly evaluate?
Yeah, or am I misunderstanding how the court system in Germany works?
So, no. I think, my suggestion would be, we need, already at police and prosecutor level, we need clear guidelines how to deal with women with disabilities as witnesses, right? They need to have already a pool of experts that actually know about people with learning disabilities. They need to know how to ask questions to a person with learning disabilities. They need to know that they need to prioritize witness testimony, call them in quickly. There's really a set of standard advice that you could give to police and prosecutors to make this better to where you can then actually evaluate the testimony of a woman with disabilities just as well as someone else's.
Okay, I guess I think what I was trying to ask was, would the prosecutors in this case, had they been given the correct tools, been able to make a good decision for their client?
If they would have, I mean, it was in the hands of the prosecution to do this well, right? I mean, the psychologist didn't do a good job, but it was in the hands of the prosecution to evaluate that and to see that. And it was in their hands also to ask for a psychologist with the appropriate expertise. So it was entirely in their hands, right?
So the failure is not just the system; it's also these prosecutors.
Well, I think it's usually
it's systematic.
It's usually like who's in the room, right? And usually who's in the room tends to be determined by social biases and stuff like this. And so there are social biases against women with disabilities or people with disabilities generally, and those biases are getting turned into these horrific systemic abuses because, as you're saying, more experts need to be in those rooms. Way more people who actually know how the system should operate on a best case scenario should be there and mandated to be there in order for this system to actually work properly for the benefit of people with disabilities.
It's not just biases, it's the lack of procedure and guidelines in place. You need to have this in place as a prosecutor. You need to know how to deal with this because these are not rare cases.
And you're going the legal route to get there. You were saying you're trying to win this case to bring these changes into effect or into motion. How does that work? Like, what's the logic behind that? How do you go from your case to the whole system changing?
So actually, I think this is a very important question because it's very hard to bring, we have all this knowledge that this is a systematic problem, right? And it's very, very hard to legally attack the question because if you're a victim of a crime in Germany and the prosecution decides to stop investigations, you're very, very limited in your recourse against this. You can have one complaint administratively against the prosecution, which they always turn down. Then you have one instance court proceeding at the higher regional court, which is never successful. As a lawyer, this is what you learn. Like you can try, but you'll never succeed, right? So we did this without success, and then we brought it to the Constitutional Court, just trying to make a point that this is just unlawful what's happening. And then eventually, if this doesn't work out at the Constitutional Court level, we'll bring it to an international court where I really think that we will have a success on this. And then maybe we'll have some structural changes in Berlin and elsewhere.
So if you're like a victim of a crime, sorry, this is so fascinating. If you're a victim of a crime and it actually something criminal has happened to you, then Germany can actually turn around and say, actually, no, it didn't.
So no, it cannot. It has to investigate if it's a crime against, for example, here sexual self-determination or against your life. Then Germany has to have effective investigation. But the margin of appreciation, what effective investigations are, is so large, and the procedural requirements for a court case to win have been cranked up so much that it's impossible to really have like a judicial review on the question.
You're going the legal route. Are there other people on this issue who are maybe campaigning or taking a different approach to trying to change this system?
Yeah, we're actually collaborating with two organizations on the issue, and one is an umbrella organization for houses that women who have experienced sexual violence can go to, BFF, and one is a self-representative organization of women with disabilities, and both on some of their projects have been working on the issue on a, let's say, more policy base, and they're now accompanying and supporting our legal case work because they see that this policy work hasn't been very successful.
And what can people do to support all of your work and all of the work of these other organizations aside from informing themselves and others?
I actually don't know if it's possible to donate money to Weibernet, which is a self-organization that accompanies us, which is a really good organization, or BFF. But follow up on us because we'll have to see for the next steps where to go, and maybe at some point there will be a crowdfunding to support the legal work that we do.
Great. Lea Beckmann, thank you so much for being here. I think this was incredibly insightful, and as you could tell with our questioning, we are still probably full of them. So thank you so much for bringing attention to this very important topic and for being here today.
And keep us posted, please.
Yes.
I will, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I've got to talk about my favorite topic, the sports.
Yay!
The World Cup is about to begin, but the mood is dampened and excitement is very low compared to previous iterations of the biggest sports event in the world.
Not if you're paid to be there.
I'm just as uninterested as I always am.
Yeah, I am like, I have felt zero difference.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, this one. And this is
Was
due...
2006 the last one?
Oh my
What
God,
year
when
is it
Italy
now?
won.
What's the year? It's
Don't you remember 2000?
It's every 4 years, I
That was a
think.
big one.
Is it every 4 years?
Yeah, every 4 years. And it is the biggest sporting event in the entire world, so...
Yeah,
It's
but it depends
worth-
on how you measure it,
It's worth mentioning.
right? I mean, how are you measuring the number of people participating?
Because that seems low.
You know?
And so, yeah, the moods aren't really... It's not the same, I can tell you, as a football fan. Excitement is very low. Mood's not really there.
Wait,
and that is because...
Is it not supposed to be in the winter?
Oh, Dan. Okay, I know nothing, but that's really
No, because
nothing.
usually we sit outside at the Späti and watch it and stuff, and you
Yeah,
walk
this is
through.
true.
Dan, it's because it's in Qatar.
Yeah.
So they changed the month it happens in.
Yeah.
Dan, seriously, man.
Look, I may only know. I know about a lot of sports stuff too. All right, maybe not number 1, but like 2 through 7.
Basketball
And they have like the
hockey.
championships. Did you say Rocky?
Hockey.
American sports, like Rocky,
Dan, but you did know about Qatar, right?
the Mighty Ducks, Qatar.
other football.
I know about the country Qatar. I know. No, I
Okay,
know. I
okay,
know.
It's
okay.
really, really hot.
Please keep
Yeah, Dan,
going.
Dan,
This
let
is
me
about to
explain, let
get
me
very
explain.
messy.
I just didn't know you could change the time of year you do a major event. That's all.
I didn't
They
Go
have
ahead. I
air-conditioned
assumed everyone
stadiums
knew.
in the middle of deserts. That's how hot it is over
Okay,
there.
let's go.
Okay.
The reason that the mood is very low is that many fans are protesting the World Cup for a whole range of reasons. One of them being the high level of corruption within the FIFA, that's the World Football Association, even giving the whole tournament to Qatar, because really, objectively, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a desert country. It's 40 degrees in the summer, which is why they moved it now to November. They didn't have any football infrastructure whatsoever, so every stadium had to be built from the ground up, again,
Well,
in the desert.
I think it's unfair to not
By
let
forced
people
laborers.
Yeah.
have sporting events just because they're a desert.
And literally all the votes within the FIFA committee were bought. Lots of them. So there's corruption. That's one reason. Then, of course, the massive waste of energy and resources going into building brand new stadiums where you could have just gone to a place that already has a bunch of stadiums. And last but not least, the truly, truly terrible working conditions for overseas laborer that have been called adjacent to modern day slavery straight up.
But how does this
Passports
affect us?
confiscated.
How is this Berlin news? This sounds like a Qatar problem.
Well, here we go.
Okay.
We've already reported that the Fanmeile that usually happens on the Straße des 17.
Shouldn't that be
Juni,
a
right?
fan kilometer?
Yeah. Yeah, true. Metric system, yeah. That's been cancelled, not because of Qatar problematic World Cup, just because of Corona and because it's too cold to have people standing outside. So the organizers were worried that no one would turn up. But now also, a bunch of bars in Berlin have pledged to boycott the World Cup and will not show any games.
They've also decided to not. I just saw they're not serving beer there in Qatar, and I have been very entertained by. There's videos of sort of like staged like German fans wandering around Qatar enjoying themselves, which are like
There are fans that are paid to be there.
Yeah.
But there's a scandal this week because their daily allowance has been taken away. So a lot of fans who were like called there from all over the world, who was paid by Qatar to be there, are not getting their daily allowance.
well, if you decide to like take money from Qatar and don't know that they will do slavery to you, then that's on you.
Okay.
Anyway, so all of this basically just means this World Cup won't be happening as publicly as previous World Cups. We won't see large crowds at the Späti because it's too cold, and we won't see people in bars because they're not showing it. There won't be a fan mile, so lots of it will just happen behind closed doors. Also, I guess we should maybe ask people to support the bars boycotting because they will be missing out on a lot of business.
Thank you so much for listening. We're going to have a few plugs for you. Do please always come and check out shows at Comedy Cafe Berlin. If you want to see me perform live, you can follow me on Instagram. I tend to write about it. But I want to plug a very specific show that both Dan and I will be in on
really?
November 26th. Too Many Cooks. Dan will be torturing me on stage, so it should be fun for everyone. Except me, obviously.
Yeah, a live cooking show starring comedians, typically who can't cook, but this time one who claims to be able to.
We'll see.
Matilda's been on regional German television as a competitive cook.
Sure have.
So
No,
we'll see
really?
what happens when I'm the judge and there's no cameras.
Good. Any other plugs?
Yeah, so this was the first stop in our Brews and News winter tour. Check out the website or our socials to find out which breweries we will be visiting over the next few months. While Joel's away, we're just gonna party, and when he gets back, we'll move it to bookstores or something.
Yeah.
More appropriate.
So thanks again to our guests Konrad Werner and Leo Beckmann. Thanks to our off-mic Radio Spaetkauf team members as well. So massive thank you to Anna-Marie Harrison for the research, script writing, editing the episode, and generally keeping us in check as our
And
producer.
thank you to Sebastian Philipp for background research. And to Joel Dolleroy, who is traveling the world and occasionally gracing us with dispatches on his Instagram. I hope we're making you proud, Joel.
And a super big thank you to Two Fellas Brewery and Mike for having us here, as this was really fun.
And thank you, our audience tonight.
Yeah, give you guys yourselves a round of applause, and we'll see you on the internet.
Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.